My name is Ray. You can be seated. My name is Rachel King. I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. A little bit about me. Wellness and revolution is what I do. So if you follow me on Instagram at @TheOnlyRachel, you'll see that. I am the Chief People Officer of Dream.org, which is a national nonprofit organization that was founded by Van Jones and Jessica Jackson. If some of you know Kim Kardashian, the way that she's getting her law degree is through one of our founders. We also created the First Step Act, where we freed about 40,000 people and counting from prison. But I hold a few titles, but my favorite title is mom. I am a multi-mama, and what that means is I have 3 children that I adopted through the foster system. I have 1 bio child that I pushed out myself. And then I have a bonus daughter from my husband. So 5 kids. And I'm a board member. That is right, I am an Austin Urban League proud board member. Yes. And the last thing I'll say, because I see some sorors in here, is for about 20 years I've been a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So yes. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Mrs. Barbie Boulez. Barbie is a registered dietitian. She's a certified health coach and meditation teacher with over 20 years of experience. She specializes in the unique needs of women over the age of 40. In her practice, she works as a coach, community educator, speaker, wellness programmer, and dietic intern preceptor. Barbie takes an evidence-based whole person approach, emphasizing nourishing foods, quality sleep, daily movement, and developing solid stress skills. She's passionate about aging well and independently, prioritizing cognitive and cardiometabolic health and Alzheimer's disease prevention. She's the founder of Brain Space, a thriving online community for women's cognitive fitness. Please welcome Mrs. Barbie.
Not only is this one of the best designed and produced events that I've ever done, it was by far and away the most fun and joyful, and the love is in the room, and I love that. That is so exciting, and to see people so engaged about their health is why I do what I do. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your interest in my conversation today, and I just want to, is it possible to get my laptop up here? It's not? Okay, I'll do my best to turn back and forth, it's fine. No worries at all. Okay, so, the topic of my conversation today is women's midlife brain power, and with perimenopause being this sort of window of opportunity. That said, as has been mentioned so many times so beautifully before, me talking today, it's never too early to think about this. It is also never too late to improve your quality of life. So this really does apply to everyone. But because the theme today is menopause and perimenopause, I'm focusing in on this because midlife women and reducing their risk of Alzheimer's disease and improving their brain health is my passion, which strangely and perhaps sadly did become personal a few years ago when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And she does live with me and I care for her full time. So what had been a professional passion became very personal, and I see neurodegenerative disease up close and personal every single day, and I want to prevent that for us. I want to be part of making a dent in the trajectory of this disease for us. So this is me. I've already been introduced, registered dietitian. I have retired from my private practice. Today I just write and speak. I am a postmenopausal woman. I graduated 3 years ago. And my specialty is cardiometabolic and cognitive fitness and Alzheimer's prevention. And I want to be clear, today what I hope for you to take away from what I'm about to say is some information that will empower you in the doctor's office. I want you to know your numbers. I think that's incredibly important. I want you to know the risks that we start to see with the menopause transition in our 40s and 50s. Risks we don't necessarily see because metabolic illness is silent. And so I want to highlight some things that you can look at your blood work and you can see, maybe this deserves a conversation even if my physician isn't saying anything about it. And also, I have spent all 20 years of my career being very serious about helping women self-advocate, so I'm so incredibly happy to hear that that is such a theme today. Your doctor is your partner. This is not an unbalanced relationship, and if you don't feel that way, look for someone who makes you feel seen, heard, and like you are sharing the responsibility together. It's an interview, and you're the one hiring, okay? All right, so let's dive in. So the 7 pillars of brain health, again, focusing on brain health. When I first started talking about brain health about 15 years ago, it was really just the top 4 that I discussed. I hope you could see this. Nutrition, movement, quality sleep, and stress skills. I have now, in the last several years, really expanded this to include lifelong learning, social connection, and finding your purpose and joy. All of these are equally important for your brain. And if any one of them is missing, start to address it. So our time today, we're going to define the phase, which has already been done so beautifully by Dr. Jessica. But what's changing, nutrition and lifestyle strategy, which is really what I'm going to focus on, and then a little checklist for you at the end. Something I want to say is that whenever I give a talk that involves slides, they are very dense. It's almost like a little ebook. So at the end, there will be a QR code. You can just shoot your phone at it. You can download it. Don't worry about remembering everything here. It'll be your little cheat sheet for later. Okay, so the menopause transition is one of the most under-researched, underfunded, and misunderstood areas in women's health. We need to do better, but fortunately, with 1.1 billion women in perimenopause, menopause as of this year, we have a lot of voices, and we're doing a much better job. So over the next, hopefully our daughters will sail through this phase of their lives. But menopause is not a disease, as it often is made to sound, or a disorder or a deficiency. It is a profound and natural biological recalibration. It is very profound. Lots of stuff is happening, but none of it is abnormal, and we're each having a unique experience, and we deserve personalized, well-informed guidance, which is in the room today. Absolutely. So we are so lucky to be here. Whoop, that's not transitioning. There we go. All right, so defining the phase. Again, so wonderfully done already, but I just want to say, just for the purposes of my talk, this is not just hot flashes and nice sweats or reproductive. Yes, it is endocrine, so hormonal, but it's also neurological, mental and emotional, cardiometabolic, so this is your blood pressure, your blood lipids, your blood sugar, your body composition. It's musculoskeletal. Many of us start experiencing a lot of chronic pain during this phase. It's immune and inflammatory. Many women start to be diagnosed with autoimmune disease, or if they've already had it, it can worsen during this phase. And integumentary, so this is our skin, hair, nails, lots of stuff is changing. And I won't go through this too much. Again, a little cheat sheet for you later, really understanding what the terminology means. But something I want to highlight about this is if you experience menopause early, so the average age of the United States is 51. If you've had surgical menopause much earlier, or primary ovarian insufficiency, you are at greater risk of these cardiometabolic changes. So I just want to highlight that for you, not to scare you, but it's information your doctor should have, and you should have a doctor that understands that puts you at an increased risk of the things I'm going to chat about. All right, so diagnosis. We don't take a test to determine whether or not we are perimenopausal, postmenopausal, unless we are having symptoms very early, say under the age of 40. This is really diagnosed by symptoms and your age. And as you can see, this is no one in particular. It's just sort of a representation of this perimenopausal phase and what's happening with our hormones. So again, this is barely any of us in the premenopausal phase where it's this perfect calibration of hormones every single month. But things get wacky in the perimenopausal period, which is why we have so many of the symptoms that we have. And some of the most common symptoms, so first of all, like 80% of women do experience symptoms, and for about 20% of us, and this is SWAN data, the study of women's health across the nation, which is kind of our gold standard for understanding the menopause transition and all the things that happen. About 20% of women experience severe or debilitating symptoms. And so if that is you, please do get to your doctor. There is treatment. We don't want to ignore this. We don't want to shove it under the rug because a lot of other things can start to happen if we let our symptoms go untreated, particularly mental and emotional distress. So regular menstruation, if we have a uterus, is kind of one of the first things we notice. Our periods get closer together, farther apart, they just kind of change. Mood instability, anxiety, and depression, especially for women with a history of mental health disorders or issues. Definitely something to pay attention to. If this is something you're noticing, please do get help. It is available. Poor quality sleep, digestive issues, oral health issues, periodontal disease. Please, 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 after the age of 40, be going to your doctor, your dentist at least twice a year, if not 4 times a year. I know that sounds like a lot to some of us, but periodontal disease is a risk factor for Alzheimer's, and not to mention very uncomfortable and cardiovascular disease. So we want to be taking care of our teeth, and that can change with decline in estrogen. Musculoskeletal pain, vasomotor symptoms, obviously, hot flashes, night sweats. Genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which was discussed quite a lot. Just changes with the badge. So some urinary stuff, some sexual health stuff, just some pain, discomfort, and then hyposexual desire disorder, which is also very treatable in several different ways. So don't ignore it. Sexual health is incredibly important. Where am I pointing to make sure that this, oh, this way. Okay, a special note on hot flashes, something that I want to highlight. If they are severe and frequent, it could be an indication of increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So again, something to tell your doctor about. If this is you and you're sweating all night, you didn't change your clothes, this is happening all day, and they are very frequent, again, this could be indicating something about your vascular health. Your doctor should know about it. And there is treatment. There's hormonal treatment, so menopause hormone therapy, HRT, is the gold standard, but there are non-hormonal treatments for women who don't want hormone therapy or are not advised to use hormone therapy. So a few things that are changing: our metabolic health, our digestive health, our brain health, and our mental health, as mentioned. So again, one of these very dense slides, but what I want to highlight here is our lipid health. And as someone who specializes in brain health and Alzheimer's prevention, I take your LDL cholesterol and your ApoB very, very, very seriously. I'm just a hawk about it. We want our LDL cholesterol to be under 100 milligrams per deciliter if we are low risk for cardiovascular disease. If we have increased risk or we are particularly interested in Alzheimer's prevention, we want it more in the 70s. Okay, now this is your LDL cholesterol, what has traditionally been labeled as bad cholesterol. And if we've had an event, a heart attack or stroke, or already have cardiovascular disease, we want our LDL cholesterol in the 50s, around 55. So this is shocking to a lot of people, but this is so important and something to really have your physician take seriously. If your primary care physician is not taking your LDL cholesterol seriously, please do ask for a referral to a cardiologist, ideally a preventive cardiologist, but they are few and far between. Hopefully that will start improving, but we need to take that LDL cholesterol seriously. Finally, it was added to the 2024 Lancet Commission report on dementia prevention, intervention, and care in 2024. It is one of the top risk factors for dementia. So again, something we really want to take seriously. ApoB is probably going to replace, not replace, but go along with in a more regular fashion with a regular lipid panel. A regular lipid panel right now is LDL, HDL, and triglycerides. We will probably start adding ApoB which is a representation of all of the heart disease or cardiovascular disease causing lipids in your blood. So it's a better indicator. If you can get it, wonderful. If not, you can look at non-HDL cholesterol. Now these numbers here, again, are to compare to your blood work that you have at home. And again, you are allowed to see your blood work. You should be getting it. You shouldn't just be letting your doctor say, oh, everything's fine. You should be seeing it and doing your homework and knowing what these numbers mean. Something else I want to point out that is not routine, but hopefully will be very soon, and it is certainly recommended by preventive cardiology bodies, is a test called Lp(a). This is this LP in the parentheses A, or lipoprotein A. This is a type of cholesterol that is genetically influenced, so you didn't do anything wrong if yours is high. Mine is incredibly high. Thanks, my parents. But I would not know that if I hadn't been listening to my preventive cardiology friends, and this is something everyone should have tested once in your life. If it is sort of borderline, test it again in the perimenopause, postmenopause phase of your life, because it could go up a little bit. And there's nothing that we can do about Lp(a) at the moment, although there are drugs and trials that we should hopefully have that target this lipid in the next year or two. But for now, what we know is if you have high Lp(a), you need to keep your LDL very, very low. So for example, my Lp(a) is very high, so I want to keep my LDL under 70, even though I have no other risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Another risk factor for cardiovascular disease and dementia, obviously, is ApoE4. That is the gene that is linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's, which I can answer questions about if you'd like. And then blood pressure. Oh my goodness, blood pressure. How important is this? Not only for your cardiovascular health, but for your brain. And it often goes kind of ignored. Certainly we can't feel it if we have high blood pressure. We really want our blood pressure definitely under 120/80, but ideally more like 115/75, or 75. And then, of course, insulin sensitivity is incredibly important. Making sure your fasting glucose is healthy and you're getting your HbA1c tested. Fasting glucose doesn't tell us a whole lot. It's just a snapshot of what your blood was doing, what the blood sugar was doing the second that your blood was drawn. Your HbA1c gives us more like a 3-month look, and that is more helpful in understanding how insulin sensitive you are. And all of this is incredibly important for reducing your risk of dementia, Alzheimer's, and keeping yourself healthy through the menopause transition. Okay, so a couple things that happen in brain health, and some of this has already been mentioned. But the brain is incredibly rich with estrogen receptors. So there is profound change happening on a cellular level in your brain. Structurally, chemically, all of which is partly why we experience all these crazy symptoms like brain fog and forgetting why we walked into a room and putting our keys in the fridge, or like whatever we're doing. Estrogen is our brain is sort of starved of estrogen, or we're getting these peaks and valleys of estrogen. And so it causes a lot of erraticism in the brain. But we know for sure that one of the things that happens is decreased glucose metabolism in the brain. And glucose is the primary fuel for our brain. And this starts to decrease. And this is part of the work, one of the most exciting researcher, I think, in this area, well, there are two, but is Dr. Lisa Mosconi. If anybody has heard of her, she's written 2 amazing books, The XX Brain and The Menopause Brain. Hers is the research to watch when it comes to menopause hormone therapy and brain health, and just women's brain health in general. All right, so menopause and dementia risk. So as I mentioned kind of briefly, said it really fast, but the Lancet Commission 2024 report on dementia prevention, intervention, and care every year revises its list of risk factors. It was 10, and then it was 12, and now it's 14 risk factors. And these are the 14 risk factors that the Lancet Commission has identified, and percentages. So if worldwide we were eliminating all of these risk factors, we could reduce dementia incidence by 45%, almost half, which is incredible. And this doesn't even include diet. And part of the reason for that is that it's very difficult. Diet is one of the most difficult things to study because everyone is sort of unique. Where this is concerned, certainly we know things, and I'm going to talk about them in a second, about what's beneficial, but there isn't anything probably ever going to be very specific here about nutrition. But nutrition impacts everything highlighted in red. Also, everything highlighted in red can become an issue in the menopause transition. So these are really areas to pay attention because we could, if we were handling everything in red and making it a non-issue for ourselves, we could keep almost 10 million brains healthy, which is, and that number is expected to double at least in 25 years. So there's a lot we can do. And women, I should say, don't think I've said this already, women are twice as likely as men to be affected by Alzheimer's disease. 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are female. Also, about 70% of Alzheimer's caregivers are female, and being a caregiver also puts us at an increased risk. So we got a lot of work to do, but I know we can do it. There we go. All right, so what's changing? We talked about our metabolic health, and we're going to talk about body composition. So bone density, as has already been highlighted here, ladies, please do not wait until age 65 to get your first bone mineral density scan. It is insane to me that that's when insurance starts covering it in most cases, or that's when it starts getting recommended, because our bone loss starts at around age 30, and it accelerates with a decline in estrogen. So by the time we're in our mid-50s, maybe even mid-40s, depending upon our genetics and habits that we may have had previously, smoking, excessive alcohol, or maybe just smaller bones to begin with, we could have definitely osteopenia, if not osteoporosis. I have so many clients who have osteoporosis at the age of 48, 49. They never would have known. We can treat that. So let's get our bone mineral density scans, for sure. All right, visceral fat. So, touchy subject, but weight gain in the menopause transition. So much more important than the number on the scale is your body composition, meaning how much of your mass is fat tissue, how much of your mass is muscle tissue, and then even more importantly, how much is visceral fat. Visceral fat is this type of fat that accumulates below the abdominal muscle, below the abdominal wall, in and around your, or I should say around your organs, compromises their function, is highly inflammatory. There isn't a great way to measure it beyond MRI, and no one is having an MRI to measure their visceral fat. This is why we use waist circumference. So anything in excess of 35 inches for women in the US, globally this number is 31.5 inches. Also, you can do a body composition DEXA scan. So it's imperfect, but it can kind of give you some clue about your visceral fat, your muscle mass, and your fat mass. But we want to be very careful about this fat that starts accumulating in the belly area because this is something that happens as a result of a decline in estrogen. Regular weight gain, like butt, hips, thighs, face, arms, back, doesn't necessarily increase during the menopause transition in the way that we think it does. Muscle mass doesn't necessarily fall off a cliff in the menopause transition like we're sometimes told that it does. Visceral fat, absolutely a result of a decline in estrogen. However, weight gain in the menopause transition or midlife is incredibly common due to a decline in muscle mass and an increase in fat mass that actually begin in our 30s. It just takes a really long time for us to kind of notice. And a few other things, which we will get to in just a second. Something I really want to highlight, which is one of the coolest, I'm geeking out, but this is one of the coolest things that I have read about, studied about, is something called a concept called personal fat threshold. And this has really improved our understanding of causation for insulin resistance, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes. A gentleman, a diabetologist named Dr. Roy Taylor, his work has shown us that it is this accumulation of visceral fat and what can also become ectopic fat. So visceral fat is deep abdominal fat, ectopic fat gets into our muscles, our liver, our pancreas. This is the cause of type 2 diabetes. This is amazing information because this means with a whole lot of effort, not saying it's easy, but we can potentially reduce it. At least insulin resistance and pre-diabetes. Type 2 diabetes would take a little more work, especially if the needle has moved. But this is largely genetically predetermined. The point at which fat starts to spill over from the subcutaneous space, so underneath your skin, into the visceral and ectopic spaces is genetics. We're all going to be different there. For example, I have had several clients over my career, 110, 115 pounds who have prediabetes because genetically their bodies start pushing fat into those spaces very early. So just knowing this information has been incredibly helpful in understanding the development of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, which is becoming, well, really has become an epidemic, and diabetes, insulin resistance is a huge risk factor for dementia. I hope I made that clear. If not, I'm happy to answer any questions about it. So midlife metabolic rate, again, it seems weird because a lot of us do gain weight at this time in our lives, but our basal metabolic rate or our resting metabolic rate really doesn't change much. There are a few things that have, but it started a little while ago, and now we have to start paying more attention. Whoops, I need to go back. To these three things: muscle loss, decreased something called NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and increased appetite. These are the three things that research and evidence, really high quality data tell us are the reasons for midlife weight gain. The good news is this is so empowering. It's not mysterious hormones doing strange things that we can't control. I'm not saying it's easy, but if we can start paying attention to these things, we can have a lot more agency. So muscle loss, this started in our 30s, like I've said several times. What do we have to do? Yes! We have to strength train, and we have to strength train our whole bodies a couple times a week. Really start building that muscle mass up. Not only is that going to be better for our metabolic rate, our overall health, our cardiovascular health, our brain health, but especially our risk of type 2 diabetes, because our muscle mass acts like a reservoir for glucose and helps us use up glucose. Decreased NEAT. So this is just that spontaneous movement that you don't even really realize you're doing. These are not your intentional workouts. Your intentional workouts are important, but when you think of regions of the world that are most known for their longevity, the blue zones, for example, they're not necessarily crushing it at the gym 4 or 5 times a week. They build activity into their daily lives. They walk to the store, they walk up hills, they walk to the farmer's market and home, and they stand up to cook, and they clean their homes, they wash their cars, they ride their bike places. This is the kind of activity we lack, particularly in this country, and this is what we need to get more of. It makes a huge difference. It's about 30 to 50% of the energy you burn in a day. So the more of this we can get, take the stairs, instead of the elevator. All that kind of stuff, it adds up. It seems like nothing, but it really adds up. And then increased appetite. This is a result of hormonal changes, both directly and indirectly. A decline in estrogen can certainly mess with our appetite, as can its effect on sleep quality. Poor sleep messes with our appetite. It can cause mood instability, which can also mess with our appetite. So if we can get a handle on these 3 factors, if weight is a concern for us, we'll be really making some serious headway. really trying. There we go. No? Okay, so lifestyle strategy focus, let's get to it. We want to build muscle, we want to prevent bone loss, we want to minimize visceral fat, we want to reduce the risk of metabolic illness, improve our brain health, time satisfaction, and sustainability, and most of all, keep it simple. I've said a lot of words, but really, my MO is keeping it as simple as possible. Again, calories in, calories out, we hate that term, but it is a biological truth. It is the foundation of keeping ourselves at a healthy weight and a healthy body composition. There is no way around being in a calorie deficit is how we lose weight, being in a calorie surplus is how we gain weight, and being in an energy balance is how we maintain weight. What makes that difficult is life. So, but we have to embrace this piece because there's too much garbage out there online, on social media, trying to convince us it's this, it's that, we have to ignore all of that and just understand that we have to find the unique way for each of us that we can, very simple, very slow, very sustainable, maybe 100 calories less a day. Find it in a snack, get more exercise, something. This is what will make the difference. And by the way, major metabolic benefits with minimal fat loss. So if any of these issues on the bottom are issues for you, minimal fat loss is where we see the biggest benefits. Okay, so some top strategies. Again, I'm not going to go through this line by line. This is sort of your little cheat sheet for later. But if we don't want to count calories, track calories, we don't have to do any of that. Volume eating. I can eat. So I need to fill my plate with lots of fruits and veggies and things that are lower in calories but have a lot of volume. That's been my biggest strategy. Mindful eating. Something I did when I was in private practice, encouraged my clients to do if this was really a struggle for them, is spend an entire week, all of their meals, no distractions. No screens, no talking to anybody, no nothing. Create your meal, put it on a plate, sit somewhere beautiful, prettiest spot in your house or your yard or whatever, and just make it about the meal. Just for a week. Anybody can do that for a week. And it's kind of wild how much we notice how much of our eating is done just completely out of distraction. Starting smart. This is actually very evidence-based, lots of research about this. Starting with something watery, so like a salad or a soup, or I'm not saying drink water, before a meal, enjoy your food, but just starting with something that's rich with water. Feeding your bugs, so keeping your gut health really in great shape. Any questions about that I can answer. That's a whole hour in itself. And giving yourself digestive rest. So I'm not a giant fan of intermittent fasting per se, but I do absolutely believe in giving your gut a rest. And because digestion and sleep are two major biological processes, we don't want to be trying to do both at once. So stopping eating a couple of hours before sleep and giving your body about 12 hours where it can just do some repairs without also having to digest food is a great idea. Again, not going to go through these line by line, but the point of this slide is that we are each physiologically unique. Our social determinants of health are unique. Our access is unique. Our preferences, our values around food are unique. There is no one diet that's best for everyone. But we have a lot of research on nutrition that reduces LDL cholesterol, improves glucose regulation, improves brain health, helps reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. This is what all of those dietary approaches have in common. So again, if that is of interest to you, have a look at this slide when you grab this presentation. You'll notice that there isn't any major restriction, no cutting out any food groups or anything like that. It's just about being very practical. And everything on that previous slide applies to all cultural preferences in terms of food, everything. Some key nutrients, especially for your brain health, EPA and DHA, so that's your omega-3s. Ideally, we're getting that from fish. That's where our best research is. But if you're not eating fish, check with your doctor, but a dietary supplement might be in order. Choline, also really important. The two reasons these are in red is because these are the two that are hardest to get from food. choline and DHA and EPA if you're not eating a lot of fish, and choline if you're not eating egg yolks. And we kind of have to be a little bit careful with saturated fat and egg yolks. Again, that's its own 15-minute conversation. So if anybody is particularly interested in that, I will answer that question. But these are the nutrients we really want to be looking out for in midlife. I feel like I have to do a little dance or something. Oh, no, I got it. Okay, so again, just some favorite foods. And again, this is not about restriction or elimination. Our healthiest dietary patterns that help reduce the risk of disease are less about what to eliminate and more about what to include. We want to be getting more of these foods, especially leafy greens for our brains. Okay, and then digestive health, I mentioned again, its own whole conversation, but fiber. You know, there's a lot of conversation about gut health. The truth about that is that that area of research is very much in its nascency. We don't know a whole lot. What we do know for sure is that we need to be getting more fiber. About 95% of women in the United States, at least, are not getting enough fiber. And it is tremendously important for our overall health. So just fiber in general, so that's going to be plant foods, that's where we get them. Veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains, don't want to be afraid of those grains. And then prebiotic fibers, which is a particular kind of fiber listed there, polyphenols, and then probiotics. Probiotics are the healthy bugs that already live in our gut. We can also eat them. There's about 3 to 5 pounds of them that live inside us. Kind of think of it like a pet, like we want to just keep it nice and healthy. We can also eat more of them. And then prebiotic fibers are the foods that these healthy bacteria really like to eat. So it's like with the prebiotic fibers, we are throwing a party for our healthy bacteria. We're giving them the food they love to eat. Okay, alcohol in midlife. There's obviously a lot here because I do want you to understand that this is something to definitely have a look at, your relationship with alcohol in midlife for lots of reasons. But primarily estrogens decline, plus an increase in visceral fat equals slower clearance of alcohol, and it can become more intoxicating and more toxic in midlife than it previously was in our 20s and 30s. And the neurotoxicity of alcohol may be heightened in a lower estrogen state. Again, remember, our brains are not functioning quite as they were. So we just want to be really mindful about alcohol. And then supplements. My main message about supplementation is be very conservative. As a dietitian of more than 20 years, almost 25 years, I've seen a lot come and go. The thing to understand about supplements is they are not particularly well regulated, if at all. You're never quite sure what you're getting. One more point I want to make is never, ever, ever buy supplements off of Amazon. A lot of them are counterfeit. Always purchase directly from the manufacturer or a store that carries, products that you really trust. But just be careful there. And more is not necessarily better. There are a lot of nutrients, even nutrients that we really, really need, that can become toxic at higher levels. Always look at supplements as supplements to a diet. They're not meant to be a replacement. And some to consider at the bottom there. And then getting into movement. I mean, if there's one thing, we can argue all day about diet and what's appropriate and supplements and all the things, but if there's one thing that all health experts agree on, or health experts and brain health experts agree on, it is that exercise is number one. Exercise is crucial to the health of your brain and the health of your body, your mental health as well. And this looks complicated. I don't mean for it to. Basically, we want to be getting about 30 minutes a day of exercise, and we want it to be varied, and we want it to, we want to cover zone 2 cardiovascular activity, we want to cover a higher intensity cardiovascular activity, we want to be getting balance, flexibility, and something that was alluded to earlier before, pelvic floor exercise becomes really important, so make sure we're not ignoring that. Sleep. So crucial for your brain for so many reasons, all outlined here. And just some tips for doing it. I have a feeling you can't see that all that well, but you will see it later when you look at it. I just want to highlight how we cannot throw sleep away. We really have to put that at the top of our list. And then, of course, stress. Stress is not just, I'm grumpy, or I don't want to do stuff. It has all of these effects on our health. And we really want to design something for ourselves that helps us filter out stress on a daily basis. If I leave you with nothing else about stress, it's that. Have a daily stress relief practice. A couple minutes in the morning, a couple minutes in the evening. Other than that, I mean, that should help a lot. But again, I did mention making sure that you take care of your mental health because it is just as important as your physical health. They're cyclical, they affect one another. And this will be your checklist for later when you want to have a look at this. And these are the QRs. This is the presentation. And then I also have a Substack that you can access. Yeah, I'm going to pick it up. That's why I started. If you would like to. So that is my presentation for you today, ladies. Sorry if I ran a bit over.
We're gonna go ahead and take some questions. Thank you so much. This was very informative. If you have any questions, go ahead and submit them via Menti. I can also walk around. If someone has something right now, I can maybe get it from you while you go ahead and put the others in Menti.
So for the questions, you're going to go to menti.com, and it's going to ask you for the code. The code is on the screen, which is 1952-1986. We will put her information back up as soon as Q&A is over, so you can go ahead and grab her details and see that presentation. So menti.com, enter that code, or scan the QR code for a Q&A now, and Rachel is walking around with the questions.
Just one question. What is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist? And then I've heard some, like, in this particular space, there's some people that, might not be the best at what they do. So what are some tips on identifying a good one to go to?
Sure, thanks for that question. So a dietitian is someone who has actually gone to school for nutrition science, so anywhere from 5 to 8 years. Literally anyone in this room could call themselves a nutritionist. There's no qualifying credentialing, nothing legal about it. And what you'll see a lot right now is people calling themselves functional nutritionists. Functional has no credentialing definition either, so be careful of that qualifier. But that would be the difference. A dietitian has earned a degree, and literally anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. So that is something to look for. If some dietitians call themselves, that's just because not everybody understands what a dietitian is. Some will just say, I'm a nutritionist, but are they an RD or RDN? Those are the two different credentialings. And, on a more granular level, if what they're talking about is in alignment with scientific consensus, cool. If they're kind of more fringe and it looks like they're just trying to get attention, like talking about seed oils or talking about, cleanses or putting coffee up their butts or whatever, no. But registered dietitian is a credential. We went to school.
Okay. The
And
next
we
question.
have continuing education. Sorry.
The next question is, how do you feel about the food order theory?
Food, what to eat first for blood sugar? Where are we?
I don't know who asked it. It's on.
Oh, okay, sorry. I had to put my other glasses on. Food order theory. So, I don't want anybody to overly micromanage the way that they're consuming food. Food is pleasure, food is nourishment, and we should eat the way that we want to eat. That said, particularly if you have blood sugar issues, either hypoglycemia or prediabetes, insulin resistance, it can be a good idea to eat something. This is kind of like what I was saying about something watery first, like a salad, maybe with a vinegar dressing, something fibrous before having something, that's sort of richer in refined carbohydrates. So fiber, protein, and then refined carbohydrates. Nothing wrong with it.
Okay. And then what are some foods that you can eat to lower your LDL?
Yeah, so fiber, number one, especially viscous fiber, so apples, oats. This is a type of fiber that binds with bile and helps pull and helps it not recirculate, so it actually ends up lowering your LDL cholesterol. The other thing to be mindful of is eating too much saturated fat. So that would be animal products that are high in saturated fat, also tropical oils like coconut oil, palm oil, which is found in a lot of ultra-processed foods. Keeping your total saturated fat intake to less than 6% of your total calories.
Okay. And then this is going to be the last question. What do you think about eating for blood type, and what is the actual recommended age for the bone scan that you mentioned?
Sure, so eating for your blood type is nonsense, so let's don't ignore that. And I would say 50, like get a bone scan by 50. Unless you have high risk, like if somebody in your family has osteoporosis, do it 40s, but if not, 50.
Okay, thank you so much. Please give some applause. That's wonderful.